Next time, make sure you know whose drink you're poisoning.
If sarcasm was a tool, I'd be on the FBI's watch list by now. But sitting here at this godforsaken faculty club, nursing my third whiskey and watching my wife Julia grind against some sleazy car salesman, I figured my razor-sharp wit was about the only thing keeping me from completely losing my mind. The annual fundraising bash. Julia's pride and joy. Every summer, she transformed the stuffy university faculty club into her personal stage, complete with twinkling lights, overpriced catering, and enough academic pretension to choke a philosophy professor. As a high school history teacher, I was definitely the blue-collar stepchild at these events, but Julia insisted I attend. For appearances, she'd say, adjusting my tie like I was her pet project. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight I'd come prepared. Eli, you look positively furious over there. Lydia Chen, Julia's best friend and fellow university administrator, slithered up to my table with that fake smile she'd perfected over years of kissing academic ego. Why don't you join the fun? I am having fun, I replied, taking another sip. Watching my wife make out with Brent Kowalski on the dance floor is absolutely riveting entertainment. Lydia's smile faltered. They're just dancing, Eli. Don't be paranoid. Paranoid, right. That's what you call it when you catch your wife whispering sweet nothings into the local used car king while he gropes her backside in front of half the university staff. I'd been watching them for 20 minutes now, and their body language screamed intimacy. The kind you don't develop over casual conversation about fundraising goals. Tell me, Lydia, I said, leaning back in my chair. How long have you known about Julia and Brent? Her face went white. Bingo. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Excuse me, I need another drink. The bar was crowded, which worked perfectly for what I had planned. I ordered another whiskey and positioned myself where I could see Julia and Brent clearly. They'd moved to a corner booth now, heads close together, completely absorbed in their conversation. That's when I saw Julia slip something into a drink. My training as a history teacher that had taught me to observe details, to piece together evidence, to understand cause and effect. What I was witnessing was my wife sedating someone's drink. The question was whose? I watched as she picked up the glass and walked toward our table where my half-finished whiskey sat waiting. My stomach dropped. The drink was for me. Julia approached with that bright smile she wore when she was lying. Honey, I brought you a fresh drink. You looked like you needed it. How thoughtful. I took the glass, swirling the amber liquid. You know what? I'm feeling social tonight. Let me get Brent a drink too. What's he having? Oh, you don't need to. I insist. I was already walking toward their booth, my doctored drink in hand. Brent was checking his phone, completely oblivious. Perfect. Brent, I called out, approaching with my biggest fake smile. Great party, isn't it? Julia's outdone herself. He looked up, surprised. We'd met maybe 3 times before, and our conversations had never progressed beyond polite small talk. Eli, right? Yeah, your wife throws quite a bash. She certainly does. Hey, can I buy you a drink? What are you having? Bourbon? Neat. I flagged down a server, ordered Brent a bourbon, and when it arrived, I made my move. Cheers to Julia's success, I said, raising my doctored glass. In the confusion of clinking glasses and the server clearing empty bottles, I executed the smoothest switch of my life. Years of handling lab equipment and teaching demonstrations had given me steady hands. Brent now held the glass Julia had sedated for me. I held his clean bourbon. Cheers, he said, and downed half the drink in one gulp. I excused myself and returned to my table, where Julia was waiting anxiously. Did you drink it? She asked quietly. Every drop, I lied, taking a sip of Brent's clean bourbon. Delicious. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. I watched Julia check her watch repeatedly, glancing between me and Brent. She was waiting for me to show signs of whatever she'd slipped into that drink. Instead, I sat there perfectly alert, making small talk and pretending everything was normal. Brent, on the other hand, was starting to look rough. It started with him loosening his tie, then wiping sweat from his forehead. By minute 10, he was gripping the edge of the booth, his face pale and clammy. By minute 15, he was doubled over, retching into a napkin. Jesus, Brent, you okay? Someone called out. That's when all heck broke loose. Brent tried to stand, and immediately collapsed, his body convulsing violently. Foam bubbled from his mouth as he writhed on the floor, gasping for air. The entire party erupted in screams and chaos. "Call emergency!" someone shouted. Julia's reaction was Oscar-worthy. She screamed like her soul was being ripped out, dropping to her knees beside Brent's convulsing body. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Brent, stay with me!" I pulled out my phone and started snapping photos. Not of Brent. That would be too obvious. Instead, I captured Julia's face, twisted in what looked like grief, but which I now recognized as panic. I got shots of the empty glass, the overturned booth, Lydia hovering nearby with guilt written all over her features. "I'm calling emergency," I announced loudly, playing the concerned husband. But I was also documenting everything, building my case one photo at a time. The paramedics arrived within minutes, stabilizing Brent and loading him onto a stretcher. Julia tried to ride with him, but they wouldn't let her since she wasn't family. She stood in the parking lot, sobbing dramatically as the ambulance pulled away. "This is all wrong," she kept saying. "This wasn't supposed to happen." No, I thought grimly. It wasn't supposed to happen to him. The party dispersed quickly after that, guests whispering among themselves about food poisoning or a heart attack. Only Lydia lingered, wrapping her arms around Julia and shooting suspicious glances in my direction. "We should go home," I told Julia gently. "You're in shock." She nodded, still crying, and let me lead her to the car. The drive home was silent, except for her occasional sniffles. I used the time to plan my next move. At home, Julia went straight to our bedroom. I heard drawers slamming and her voice on the phone, probably calling the hospital for updates on Brent. I went to my study and uploaded the photos from tonight to a secure cloud account. Then I did something that would seem careless to anyone who didn't know me better. I left our tool safe open. Julia found me in the kitchen 20 minutes later, her eyes red and wild. "This is your fault," she said. "My fault. How is Brent's medical emergency my fault?" "You did something. I know you did." She was pacing now, her hands shaking. "You've been acting strange all week." "Strange how? By being a loving, attentive husband?" I kept my voice calm, reasonable. "Julia, you're upset. Brent's going to be fine. Don't lie to me." She spun around and I saw something in her hand that made my blood run cold. Our .38 Colt, the one I deliberately left accessible. "Julia, put the tool down. You poisoned him, didn't you? You found out about us and you tried to end him." There it was, the confession I'd been waiting for. "Found out about what exactly?" I asked, my hands raised but my voice steady. "You know what? You've known for weeks!" Her finger was on the trigger, the barrel pointed directly at my chest. "But it wasn't supposed to be him, was it? That drink was meant for you." Another confession. I was building quite a collection. "Julia, listen to yourself. You're talking about poisoning your own husband. You drove me to it. You with your boring job and your boring life and your boring—" The tool went off. The bullet missed me by inches, punching a hole through the kitchen wall and probably into our neighbor's yard. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, and Julia stared at the smoking tool in her hand like she couldn't believe what had just happened. That's when we heard the sirens. Someone had called the police about the loud bang. Perfect timing. "Julia," I said quietly, "you need to put the tool down now. The police are coming." She looked at me with pure hatred, but she set the tool on the counter. "This isn't over, Eli. Not by a long shot." I smiled grimly. "No, it's not, but it's my turn now." The police arrived, with all the subtlety of a marching band. 3 squad cars, lights flashing, neighbors gathering on their front porches like this was the evening's entertainment. In a way, I suppose it was. Officer Martinez was the first through the door, hand on his tool, eyes scanning for immediate threats. He was young, maybe late 20s, with that eager-to-prove-himself energy that could work in my favor. "We got a report of a loud disturbance," he said. "Everyone okay here?" "We're fine, officer," I replied calmly. "My wife had a bit too much to drink at a party tonight, and she accidentally discharged our tool. No one was hurt." Julia stared at me in disbelief. I was handing her a lifeline, and she was smart enough to take it. "I'm so sorry," she said, putting on her best contrite voice. "I was upset about a friend who got sick tonight, and I wasn't thinking clearly. I know how dangerous tools can be." Officer Martinez looked between us, then at the bullet hole in the wall. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step outside while we sort this out." As Julia was led away for questioning, I gave my statement with the practiced calm of someone who'd taught hundreds of teenagers how to analyze historical events. Facts, timeline, cause, and effect. No drama, no accusations, just the truth presented in the most favorable light possible. My wife works at the university, I explained. She organized a fundraising event tonight, and one of the attendees had some kind of medical emergency. She's been very stressed about it. When we got home, she was looking at our tool. We keep it for home protection, and it went off accidentally. She's not used to handling firearms. It was all technically true. The best lies always were. After 2 hours of statements and paperwork, the police left with a warning about tool safety and a promise to follow up if needed. Julia returned to the house, looking shell-shocked. "Why did you cover for me?" she asked. "Because despite everything, you're still my wife," I said, "and because I'm not done with you yet." The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Tony Ricci's auto repair shop. Tony had been my best friend since high school, and after 20 years as a cop before retiring to fix cars, he had skills I needed. "You look like heck," Tony said, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The affair, the sedated drink, the tool incident. Tony listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. "So what do you want to do about it?" he asked when I finished. "I want evidence. Real evidence. Not just my word against hers." Tony grinned. "Now you're talking my language." We started with Julia's laptop. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, probably forgotten in all the chaos from last night. Tony had some interesting software from his cop days, programs that could recover deleted files and crack password-protected folders. What we found was better than I'd hoped. Months of emails between Julia and Brent, starting innocent enough but quickly turning explicit. Hotel receipts charged to her university credit card. Photos I definitely didn't take. And most incriminating of all, a detailed plan for what they called Operation Sleepy Time. "Jesus Christ," Tony muttered, reading over my shoulder. "She really was trying to sedate you." The plan was laid out in sickening detail. Julia would slip me a combination of melatonin and Benadryl at the party, enough to make me drowsy but not dangerously so. Then she and Brent would drive me home, put me to bed, and stage some compromising photos while I was unconscious. The photos would be their insurance policy if I ever tried to divorce her or expose the affair. "They were going to blackmail you with fake evidence," Tony said. "Make it look like you were into some kinky crap." "Except their victim switched the drinks," I replied. "Poor Brent got a dose meant for someone 40 pounds lighter." We printed everything, made multiple copies, and stored them in different locations. Then Tony suggested we do some field reconnaissance. If they're this sloppy with digital security, they're probably sloppy in other ways too. He was right. Brent's used car lot was a goldmine of stupidity. His office computer wasn't even password protected, and his filing cabinets were unlocked. Within an hour, we'd discovered that Brent Kowalski wasn't just a sleazy car salesman. He was a sleazy car salesman with connections to some very questionable people. Financial records showed payments from a local motorcycle club known for illicit activities. Nothing provably illegal, but definitely the kind of association that would raise eyebrows if it became public knowledge. "This guy's dirty," Tony said, photographing bank statements. Question is, how dirty? We got our answer when Maya Santos walked into the lot. Maya was the bartender at the Rusty Tap, a dive bar on the wrong side of town, where Brent apparently spent his evenings when he wasn't seducing married women. She was also, according to the photos we'd found, Brent's other woman. "Is Brent here?" she asked, not recognizing me. "He's in the hospital," I replied. "Food poisoning or something?" "I'm Eli Madsen, Julia's husband." Her face went through several interesting expressions: surprise, guilt, anger, and finally resignation. "Crap," she said. "You know, don't you?" "I know a lot of things. Question is, what do you know?" Maya looked around the empty lot, then back at me. "Can we talk somewhere private?" 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a booth at the Rusty Tap while Maya told me everything. Brent had been using her as an alibi for months, claiming he was at the bar when he was actually with Julia. He'd also been using her apartment to store cash from his motorcycle club friends, money that definitely wasn't reported to the IRS. "I thought he was going to leave his wife for me," Maya said bitterly. "Then I found out he was screwing around with your wife, too." Guy's a real piece of work. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I'm tired of being used. And because if Brent's in the hospital, someone needs to know about the money he's got stashed at my place. $20,000 in cash, just sitting in my closet like a ticking time bomb. I felt a plan forming. Maya, how would you like to help me teach Brent and my wife a lesson? She smiled for the first time, since we'd started talking. I'm listening. That evening, I visited Brent in the hospital. It was surprisingly easy to get past the nurses. I just claimed to be his business partner, checking on urgent matters. Brent was awake but groggy, hooked up to an IV, and looking like death warmed over. Eli, he said weakly, what are you doing here? I pulled a chair close to his bed and leaned in. I came to thank you, Brent, for showing me what kind of woman I married. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. That's right, I continued quietly. I know about the affair. I know about your little plan to sedate me and take compromising photos. I even know about the money you're hiding at Maya's apartment. You can't prove anything, he whispered. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the emails Julia had sent, the one detailing exactly how much Benadryl to use and when to slip it into my drink. Actually, I can prove everything. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Brent closed his eyes. What do you want? I want you to stay away from my wife. I want you to close down your little money laundering operation. And I want you to remember that next time you try to slip something into someone's drink, you better make sure you're not drinking from the wrong glass. I stood up to leave, then turned back. Oh, and Brent, if you ever come near me or my family again, what happened at that party will seem like a pleasant evening compared to what I'll do to you. His heart monitor started beeping faster. I smiled and walked out. Phase 1 was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2. I spent the next day setting up my trap with the precision of a history teacher preparing a final exam. Every detail planned, every contingency considered, every piece of evidence carefully arranged for maximum impact. Using Brent's phone, which I'd lifted from his hospital room, I sent Julia a text. Can't talk at hospital. Too many ears. Meet me at Rusty Tap tonight. 9 p.m. Come alone. We need to figure out what went wrong. Julia's response was immediate. OMG, yes. I've been so worried. See you at 9. Perfect. She thought she was meeting her lover for a crisis management session. Instead, she was walking into an ambush. I arrived at the Rusty Tap at 8:30, giving myself time to set the stage. Maya had agreed to help, and Tony was positioned at the bar with a clear view of everything. The place was busy enough to provide witnesses, but not so crowded that we couldn't have a private conversation. At exactly 9 o'clock, Julia walked through the door. She looked around nervously, clearly out of her element in the dive bar atmosphere. Her university fundraiser wardrobe, designer dress and pearls, stood out like a peacock in a chicken coop. When she spotted me sitting in Brent's usual booth, her face went white. Hello, Julia, I said pleasantly. Looking for someone? She stood frozen for a moment, then slowly approached the table. Where's Brent? Still in the hospital, recovering from his mystery illness. You know, the one caused by the substances you meant for me. Julia glanced around, probably looking for an escape route. I don't know what you're talking about. Sit down, Julia. We need to have a conversation. She sat, but perched on the edge of the seat like she was ready to bolt. Eli, whatever you think you know, I know everything. I pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table between us. 6 months of emails, hotel receipts, photos, your entire sordid affair, documented in excruciating detail. Her hands trembled as she reached for the folder, then stopped. You went through my private communications? Your private communications about sedating your husband? Yeah, I did. Fascinating reading, by the way. Especially the part where you called me a boring loser who deserves whatever he gets. Eli, please, let me explain. Oh, I'd love to hear this explanation. Please enlighten me about why you decided to poison me instead of just asking for a divorce like a normal person. Julia's composure cracked. Because you would have fought me. You would have made it ugly and expensive and dragged it out forever. So your solution was to sedate me and take blackmail photos? It wasn't supposed to hurt you, just make you sleepy so we could get some leverage. Leverage. I repeated the word like it tasted bad. Is that what we're calling emotional coercion now? That's when Maya appeared at our table, carrying a beer for me and a knowing smile. Julia, right? Maya said, extending her hand. I'm Maya Santos. I think we have a mutual friend. Julia looked confused. I'm sorry, do we know each other? Not directly, but we've both been sleeping with Brent Kowalski. Small world, isn't it? The color drained from Julia's face completely. What? Maya slid into the booth next to me, clearly enjoying herself. Oh, honey, you didn't know? Brent's been using my apartment for his little side business for months. Told me he was leaving his wife for me, but apparently he was telling you the same thing about leaving his wife for you. Except neither of us is his wife. That's impossible, Julia whispered. Is it? I opened the folder and spread out several photos across the table. These are from Brent's phone. Recognize the woman in the red dress? Julia stared at the photos of Maya and Brent in compromising positions, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and humiliation. He's been playing both of you, I continued. Using Maya's place to store cash from his motorcycle club friends, using you for your university connections and credit card. You weren't his great love, Julia. You were just another mark. You're lying, she said, but her voice had no conviction. Maya laughed. Honey, I've got $20,000 of his dirty money sitting in my closet right now. You think he'd trust me with that if I was just some random hookup? Julia's carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time. The sophisticated university administrator who thought she was having a glamorous affair was discovering she was just another victim in a small-time con man's portfolio. So what happens now? She asked quietly. Now you're going to listen very carefully, I said, because I'm about to explain exactly how this is going to work. Before I could continue, the bar's front door burst open and Brent stumbled in. He looked terrible, pale, unsteady, still wearing hospital scrubs under a hastily thrown-on jacket. His eyes swept the room until they found our table, and his face went through the same emotional journey Julia's had moments earlier. What the heck is this? He demanded, lurching toward us. It's called consequences, I replied calmly. Have a seat, Brent. We were just discussing your business practices. I don't have to listen to this crap. He reached for Julia's arm. Come on, we're leaving. I stood up smoothly, blocking his path. Actually, you're not going anywhere until we're finished talking. Brent was bigger than me, but he was also sick, disoriented, and outnumbered. When he tried to push past me, I grabbed his wrist and applied just enough pressure to make him wince. Sit down, Brent. The entire bar had gone quiet, sensing the tension. Tony caught my eye from across the room and nodded slightly. He was ready if things got physical. Brent sat. Good, I said, returning to my seat. Now that we're all here, let's clear the air. Julia, tell Brent about your little pills plan. Eli, don't. Tell him or I will. Julia looked between Brent and me, trapped. It was just supposed to make you sleepy, she said finally, so we could take some photos and have something to use if you tried to make the divorce difficult. Brent's face hardened. You were going to sedate your husband? It was your idea, Julia snapped. You said we needed insurance. I said we needed to be careful. I didn't say anything about poisoning anyone. Maya laughed. Oh, this is rich. The cheaters are turning on each other. I leaned back in my seat, enjoying the show. Here's what's really funny, Brent. You got a dose meant for someone 40 pounds lighter than you. If Julia had succeeded in sedating me, I probably would have just gotten drowsy, but you nearly died. Jesus Christ, he muttered. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. Julia, you're going to move out of our house this weekend. You can stay wherever you want, but it won't be with Brent, because Brent is going to be very busy cleaning up his financial situation. What financial situation? Julia asked. I smiled at Maya. Want to tell her or should I? Maya grinned. Your boyfriend's been laundering money for the Serpents Motorcycle Club. 20 grand so far, all sitting in my apartment like evidence waiting for the FBI to find it. That's not, Brent started. It's not what? I interrupted. Not illegal, not stupid, not exactly the kind of thing that would destroy your business if it became public knowledge. Brent slumped in his seat, defeated. So here's the deal, I said. Maya is going to return that money to wherever it came from. Brent's going to close down his little side business and focus on selling cars legally. And Julia's going to file for divorce quietly, without trying to claim half of everything I've worked for. And if we don't, Julia asked. I gestured to the folder of evidence. Then copies of everything in here go to the university administration, the police, the IRS, and every gossip blog in town. Your choice. Julia stared at the table, tears streaming down her face. I never meant for any of this to happen. Yes, you did, I replied. You just meant for it to happen to me instead of your boyfriend. Brent suddenly lunged across the table, grabbing for the folder. You can't prove any of this! I was ready for him. As he reached across the table, I grabbed his wrist again and slammed his hand down hard, sending his beer glass flying. The crash echoed through the suddenly silent bar. "That's for the drink," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Then I picked up his spilled beer and poured it slowly over his head. "And this is for my wife." The entire bar erupted in cheers and applause. Brent sat there dripping, humiliated, while Julia sobbed, and Maya laughed so hard she nearly fell off her seat. "Show's over," I announced to the room. "Thanks for your attention." As the normal bar noise resumed, I leaned close to Brent. "Touch me or anyone in my family again, and next time it won't be beer I'm pouring on you." I stood up, tossed a 20 on the table, and walked out of the rusty tap with my head held high. Phase 2 was complete. Time for the finale. The next morning, I woke up feeling better than I had in months. For the first time since discovering Julia's affair, I was in control of the situation. She'd spent the night at Lydia's apartment, probably crying about how her perfect plan had backfired, while I enjoyed the peace and quiet of my own house. I made coffee, read the newspaper, and planned the final phase of my revenge with the methodical precision of a chess master arranging checkmate. Tony arrived at noon with a truck full of equipment and a grin that would have made the Cheshire Cat jealous. "You ready to have some fun?" he asked. "I've been ready for months." We drove to Brent's car lot, arriving during the lunch hour when most of his employees would be away. The place was nearly deserted, just one salesman showing a minivan to a young couple near the front of the lot. Brent's pride and joy sat in the back corner, a restored 1960 Camaro SS that he'd spent 2 years and probably $30,000 rebuilding. Cherry red paint, chrome bumpers, leather interior. He'd shown me photos of it at last year's fundraiser, back when I thought he was just Julia's annoying acquaintance instead of her pills-dealing lover. "Shame to see such a beautiful car belonging to such an ugly person," Tony said, pulling on latex gloves. We worked quickly and efficiently. Tony had brought paint stripper, which we applied in strategic locations. Not enough to destroy the car, but enough to create embarrassing bald patches that would cost thousands to repair. We loosened the lug nuts on all 4 wheels, just enough to make the car unsafe to drive, but not enough to cause an immediate accident. And as a final touch, I left a note under the windshield wiper. "Next time, sleep with your own wife. A concerned citizen." The whole operation took less than 20 minutes. We were back in Tony's truck and driving away before anyone noticed what we'd done. "Phase 1 complete," Tony said. "What's next?" "Now we destroy Julia's reputation the same way she tried to destroy mine." Julia worked at the university's development office, managing relationships with major donors and organizing fundraising events. Her entire career was built on her image as a trustworthy, professional, morally upright representative of the institution. That image was about to take a serious hit. I'd spent the morning creating anonymous email accounts and researching the contact information for everyone who mattered in Julia's professional world. Department heads, board members, major donors, fellow administrators. By the time I was finished, I had a mailing list of over 200 people. The email I sent was simple and devastating. "Dear members of the university community, I feel obligated to inform you about concerning behavior by Julia Madsen of the Development Office. Mrs. Madsen has been using university resources, including her corporate credit card, to conduct an extramarital affair with local businessman Brent Kowalski. More troubling, she recently attempted to sedate her husband at a university-sponsored event, resulting in Mr. Kowalski's hospitalization when the plan went wrong. I have attached documentation supporting these claims, including emails, receipts, and photographs. While Mrs. Madsen's personal life is her own business, her use of university resources and her involvement in what appears to be an attempted poisoning reflect poorly on our institution. I trust you will handle this matter with appropriate discretion. A concerned member of the university family." The attachments included carefully selected emails, the most incriminating ones, hotel receipts showing charges to Julia's university credit card, and photos from the night of the party showing her obvious distress when Brent collapsed. I sent the email at 3 p.m., right when people would be checking their afternoon messages. By 4 p.m., my phone was ringing. "Eli, this is Dr. Patricia Hoffman from the university. I need to speak with you immediately about your wife." Dr. Hoffman was the vice president for development, Julia's direct supervisor. I'd met her several times at university events, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who didn't tolerate anything that might embarrass the institution. "Of course, Dr. Hoffman. How can I help you?" We've received some very serious allegations about Julia's conduct. I need to know if these claims have any basis in fact." I paused, as if considering my response carefully. "Dr. Hoffman, I'm going through a difficult time right now. Julia and I are separating due to her relationship with Mr. Kowalski." I wasn't aware that university resources were involved, but if they were, that's obviously very concerning. The email mentions an attempted sedating incident. There was an incident at the fundraiser where Mr. Kowalski became seriously ill. The police were called to our house later that evening due to an accidental firearm discharge. Julia was very upset about Mr. Kowalski's condition. Everything I said was technically true, but I let Dr. Hoffman draw her own conclusions about the connections between these events. "I see. Eli, I want you to know that the university takes these matters very seriously. Julia has been suspended pending a full investigation." "I understand. I'm sorry this has become a problem for the university." After hanging up, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Julia's career was effectively over. Even if the investigation didn't find sufficient evidence for termination, the scandal would follow her for years. My phone rang again. This time, it was Lydia. "Eli, what the heck did you do?" she screamed. "Julia's been suspended. There are rumors flying all over campus." "I didn't do anything, Lydia. Julia's actions have consequences. Maybe you should have thought about that before you helped her plan to sedate me." "I never helped her plan anything." "Really? Because I have emails that suggest otherwise. Want me to forward them to your supervisor too?" The line went quiet. "That's what I thought," I continued. "Here's some free advice, Lydia. Distance yourself from Julia as quickly as possible, or you'll go down with her." I hung up and immediately began preparing for the final confrontation. That evening, I drove past Brent's car lot just to see the results of our morning's work. His Camaro sat exactly where we'd left it, but now it was surrounded by a small crowd of people pointing and laughing. The paint stripper had done its work, leaving ugly patches of bare metal scattered across the once pristine surface. Someone had apparently tried to move the car because it was sitting at an odd angle with one wheel slightly askew, probably the result of those loosened lug nuts. Brent himself was nowhere to be seen, but I could imagine his reaction when he discovered the damage. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You're going to pay for this, you bastard." I smiled and typed back, "Looking forward to it." The final phase was about to begin. The showdown came sooner than I expected. I was grading papers in my study when Julia burst through the front door without knocking. She looked like heck, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, wearing the same clothes she'd had on yesterday. Behind her, Brent limped in, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "We need to talk," Julia announced. "By all means," I replied, setting down my red pen. "But I should mention that I've installed security cameras throughout the house. Smile for posterity." It was a lie, but they didn't know that. Brent stepped forward menacingly. "You think you're real clever, don't you? Cleverer than someone who drinks sedated whiskey meant for someone else, apparently. You destroyed my car. I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been home all day, grading papers. Tony Ricci can vouch for me. He stopped by around lunchtime to discuss my car's transmission." Another lie, but Tony would back me up if needed. Julia was pacing like a caged animal. "My career is ruined, Eli. Completely destroyed. 20 years of work, gone. Actions have consequences, Julia. You tried to sedate and blackmail your husband. Did you think there wouldn't be repercussions? I never tried to blackmail anyone." I walked to my desk and pulled out a printed email. Quote, "Once we get the photos, Eli will have to give me whatever I want in the divorce. He won't risk having those pictures made public." End quote. What would you call that? She snatched the paper from my hand, reading it with growing horror. "How did you get this?" "The same way I got everything else. You're not nearly as smart as you think you are." Brent grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. "You're going to fix this? You're going to call the university and tell them it was all a misunderstanding?" I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. "Remove your hand or I'll remove it for you." "You don't scare me, you pathetic—" I drove my knee into his solar plexus, doubling him over. As he gasped for air, I grabbed his collar and shoved him backward into the wall. "I told you to remove your hand," I said calmly, "and next time, listen." Julia screamed and tried to intervene, but I held up a warning finger to, "Stay back, Julia. This is between Brent and me. Brent straightened up slowly, his face red with pain and embarrassment. You sucker punched me. I defended myself from someone who was physically restraining me in my own home. There's a difference. This isn't over, he snarled. Actually, it is. I walked back to my desk and pulled out a thick manila envelope. This contains copies of everything I have on both of you. Financial records, emails, photographs, witness statements. One copy goes to the police if anything happens to me. Another goes to the IRS if Brent doesn't clean up his business practices immediately. And a third goes to every newspaper in the state if either of you ever contact me again. Julia's face went white. You can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply documenting what you've already done and ensuring that the appropriate authorities are aware of it. The money at Maya's apartment, Brent said quietly. You can't prove I knew it was there. Maybe not, but I can prove you've been claiming business expenses for hotel rooms where you weren't conducting any business. I can prove you've been using your dealership to clean money for the serpents. And I can prove you conspired to sedate someone, which is felony assault. Brent slumped into a chair, finally understanding the scope of his predicament. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. Julia, you're going to quietly resign from the university and move out of town. Start over somewhere else and maybe learn from this experience. Brent, you're going to return every penny of that dirty money, cut all ties with your motorcycle club friends, and run your business legally from now on. And if we don't, Julia asked, then I release everything to everyone, and you both go to prison. Your choice. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of their situation settling in. Finally, Julia spoke. I never meant for it to go this far, she said quietly. Yes, you did. You meant for it to go exactly this far, just with me as the victim instead of Brent. What about our marriage? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Our marriage ended the moment you decided to sedate me and take blackmail photos. Everything since then has just been cleanup. Brent struggled to his feet. Come on, Julia. Let's get out of here. One more thing, I called as they reached the door. If either of you ever comes near me, my house, or my workplace again, I'll consider it harassment and respond accordingly. Are we clear? They nodded and left without another word. I watched through the window as they got into Brent's damaged car and drove away. The Camaro made an odd grinding noise and pulled slightly to the left. Those loose lug nuts were definitely affecting the alignment. My phone rang. It was Tony. How'd it go? He asked. Better than expected. They're beaten and they know it. So what now? Now I get on with my life. File for divorce, sell the house, maybe take that teaching position in Colorado I've been considering. Sounds like a plan. You want to grab a beer and celebrate? I looked around the house that had been my home for 8 years, filled with memories that were now tainted by betrayal and deception. Yeah, I think I do. As I locked up the house and headed to my car, I reflected on the events of the past week. A lesser man might have simply filed for divorce and moved on. But Julia and Brent had tried to destroy me, to humiliate me, to turn me into their victim. Instead, they'd learned a valuable lesson about underestimating a history teacher who understood the importance of documentation, evidence, and strategic planning. The anniversary party had been Julia's moment to shine, her chance to celebrate another successful year of fundraising, while secretly plotting my downfall. Instead, it had become the beginning of her complete destruction. As I drove toward the rusty tap to meet Tony, I allowed myself a satisfied smile. Some people need a warning, others need a lesson. Julia and Brent got both.